Oh, God love you. So, are you recording?
Yeah, are you recording?
I am recording. Do you not find it interesting that we only record these things in moments of like international tragedy?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot more to go around in the last 4 years than previous.
This is I found myself really embodying, soon to be, next week I'll be 41, and really embodying like my 41-year-old self being like, do you guys remember the 90s? The 90s were fucking awesome. Nothing happened. Everyone was angry. Billy Corgan was just enraged,
Right.
Like,
Yeah, and the biggest crisis was that the president got a blowjob.
everything was fine, but something was wrong. And now, which everything is wrong, but you have to keep reminding yourself everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah. It's gonna be fine. That's what we keep saying.
I'm John Totten, and this is Between Us.
You okay?
There's got to be a vaccine.
Pamela, we talked about this. There is no vaccine.
Well, something fishy's going on, if you ask me. You mean to tell me the President of the United States doesn't have a vaccine? Yeah, right.
When the weather is nice, sometimes, I sit on my back porch and watch the planes in the distance as they descend towards SeaTac International Airport. On most evenings, there is a steady stream. You see a new plane about every 5 minutes. Lately, they seem to have slowed to a couple per hour. And still, that seems as though it's too much activity for the current events. On January 15th, 2020, Seattle became ground zero for the American branch of the COVID-19 outbreak, aka the coronavirus. In late February, the coronavirus had made its way into local nursing homes and caused its first American deaths. A week later, schools across Washington state were being closed for what would eventually be a year-ending closure. As the virus was discovered at offices like Amazon and Facebook, corporate entities started to mandate working from home as an official policy. In mid-March, my wife and I decided to cancel our vacation to see my parents in Tennessee, fearing we might bring the covert disease with us. And soon after, I went to buy an office chair in preparation for a new reality in which my work would be done completely from home. We were lucky. We were lucky to be in Washington state, where we got an early warning. As of now, there are still parts of the United States that are not addressing the danger. Soon after our governor ordered citizens to stay home unless their jobs were deemed essential, New York City overtook Seattle as the American epicenter. In metropolitan areas across the country, from New York to New Orleans to Chicago to LA, hospitals are currently preparing for a week of historic overuse and resource shortage, a reality that many Americans still don't believe to be possible, in which more severely affected patients are sent home to die at triage in order to reserve medical equipment for those more likely to be saved. In the worst cases, many of the medical community have called it apocalyptic. My family and I, so far, are lucky. Many of my clients are technologically minded and well employed. As they work from home, they can easily take an hour out of their day to attend video chat therapy. Not everyone has adjusted to it. Some have left, but the work continues. And my wife is a nurse who is guaranteed to have employment through this crisis. Not everyone I know can say the same. Many of our friends and family are service industry workers or retail workers. Their jobs depend on gatherings that are currently banned. And it feels very guilty to say that sometimes I feel silver linings. As I work on this episode, I'm sitting on that back porch, watching the trickle of planes. I'm safe and healthy, knock on wood. I'm remembering what is important in life, and I'm looking at a baby monitor, watching my 11-month-old daughter sleep peacefully in my former recording studio, now a nursery. Shortly before our last season ended, my wife gave birth to our first child. That's why the fourth season hasn't come out as quickly as you might have liked. I've been a bit busy. Today I spent 2 hours following her as she crawled around the house and tried to eat various things from the floor. Crumbs, leaves, dog food. She's extremely silly and independent and musical and opinionated and vocal about it. It's an internal conflict to like my life so much at this time, and yet part of why I am grateful is that this disease does not affect her like it will or might affect us. She is not particularly vulnerable to it, and she has no idea what is going on. That lack of understanding is blissful to her, but the uncertainty of this time is nightmarish to many of us. So Mason and I decided to talk about it. This is much earlier than we planned on continuing the show, so unfortunately I don't have the next episode ready for you in 2 weeks, or even 2 months. We are working on the rest of the season, but we decided the circumstances called for a one-off. So this weekend I called Mason, who lives in Cardiff, Wales, and is experiencing this crisis through the lens of British culture.
Yeah, so it's bizarre. I guess maybe we should talk about therapy.
Oh, God. Must we? Well, from our conversations, we've both found ourselves at slightly different places. So who should go first?
Yeah, I mean, I can just talk a little bit about my experience, which is, first of all, my own kind of anxiety about how this is going to work. I have only ever used technology in therapy as like a substitute when someone is traveling for work or, here and there. There was one day last year where Seattle actually had some snow. I did work from home, and my sense was that people really didn't like it. And so I was a little bit freaked out when I realized that this was going to have to be a indefinite change. And for the most part, people have not liked it, but have gone along with it. I think maybe because in Seattle, there's a sense of this might be just how life is for a while, and might as well go ahead and adjust instead of fighting it, kicking and screaming. So, it's been 2 or 3 weeks of doing therapy at home, either with video chat, or some people prefer just to talk on the phone. So far, it's been an adjustment for sure. Talking is different. Cadences are different. I am a very bantery kind of therapist, which sometimes means interrupting to ask a question, and it doesn't work as well when the connection is latent. It's been an adjustment, but therapy is continuing.
What platform have you been using?
It's that's something that hasn't been very streamlined. I've gotten on the Zoom train. I've been using Google Hangouts. Some people prefer FaceTime, and it's kind of a matter of like me having to go back and check my like email records to see before each session. So the like little break between each session has gotten a little bit more hectic. Also, considering that I'm at home, I have a 10-month-old daughter who is at home as well. So like we're all kind of in the house, and so it's nice but also strange to like go see her in between sessions.
Sure.
But yeah, it's mostly video chat.
I suppose I've done a bit more of that over the years. I don't know why. I think just in being flexible, because people's definitions, there are different cultural expectations of what therapy is, and I think over here it's a bit more pliable. It's not so fixed to face. So I've done, quite a bit of not only video but also phone therapy, which I prefer. I have to say, I find video sessions quite distracting because I'm constantly looking at myself. I hate that. I'm constantly seeing myself, which in some ways, as an instructive tool, you can sort of assess, like, oh, am I fucking touching my face like an asshole constantly? Or, it's like, yes, I am. Congratulations. Like, oh, am I fidgeting nonstop? Do I ever stop moving? Oh, yep, check. Good job. Where I find myself on the phone, I find the immediacy of it. And also, I'm sure this is the same everywhere in the world. Everyone's getting through this crisis at home. Most of us, are balancing, whether you're working, whether you're a student who's trying to learn something, whether you're, like my 5-year-old trying to either, between reading games or watching a show to amuse herself, everyone's online. Mm-hmm. There's only so much bandwidth. So there's something about, I find the phone a bit more streamlined because you're constantly finding that battle of the picture freezes or Zoom tells you, your bandwidth is crap. And there's something about the latency of it. If psychotherapy is more art than science, all of a sudden there's this strange art of this technological lag which just interrupts that flow. I don't know. In some ways it's something I'm used to. In other ways I find it an impediment. But it's also sort of therapy in wartime.
In the last few years, there has been a whole culture arise around remote therapy. There are many younger therapists who only practice this way. It allows them to meet without an office, to travel, to live the way much of the so-called gig economy lives. And there have also appeared the app-based counseling services, where users pay membership fees and a remote therapist on their app is accessible to them at certain times. I don't have a lot of judgment for these methods of finding help. There are people in small towns who have difficulties finding someone who is a good fit. There are people who can't afford the typical fees who need these services. And yeah, after being forced to practice remotely for the last month, I kind of like the idea of being able to take my family to a rural area on vacation and still maintain the connection with my clients. I've never been good at taking time off, and that kind of lifestyle seems enticing to me sometimes. But at the end of the day, I realize I am still grieving the loss of a hyper-responsive environment in which to do my work. The best way I can think of to explain that is the analogy of my first and initial trade, playing bass. I've been a bass player since I was about 10. I studied jazz in my undergraduate career and moved to Seattle when I was 22 in order to play music. And the double bass and the electric bass are still passions of mine. If you're a musician, you might get this analogy, but when you play an electric instrument with a really responsive amplifier, you are able to react quickly and use the feedback to your advantage to emphasize certain notes and intricacies. When the room fills with the sound of your amp, you have to work less to make it sound good. You can breathe a bit more and let the instrument do its own work. The slightest move of a pinky might create a really beautiful effect. That to me is how counseling someone in the same room face-to-face is, hyper-responsive. So far, for me, counseling online has been like playing an electric instrument with no amp. The sound comes out, and maybe it sounds pretty, and your bandmate can hear it and respond to it, but it requires more muscle, and the vibrations aren't as big. I'm just learning how to play it that way, but I miss the amplifier of the treatment room.
And also, we're in two slightly different places with how our practices fit into our finances. Like for me, between my PhD stipend and my teaching, I try and keep about 6 to 10 hours a week, but it's not something I have to do financially. It's something I do because I love to do it.
Right. Right.
What's that been like for you? Because, I mean, you teach, but this is primarily your gig financially at the moment.
Yeah, and my wife, she reduced her hours after her maternity leave. So, the financial burden in our family is more percentage-wise on me than it was before.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more of a must there. Like the therapy must continue.
Sure.
Also, I don't know what I would do with myself if it wasn't. So there's that as well. But certainly a higher degree of economic anxiety. There is the fact that she's a nurse. So if she needed to work more, there's always the opportunity. So there's plenty of backup plans for us. One thing that I encounter is my clients being concerned about me during this, around the business and around, my mental health, which is, it's interesting, this is similar to the election. This is one of those times where we are in it with our clients, unlike other things. When a client comes to me and they are anxious about their work situation, well, that's something I can certainly empathize with, but it's not something I'm experiencing at the moment. Whereas this is something I'm experiencing at the moment with my clients.
Yeah. Which is an insane phenomenon in the history of psychotherapy, which, whether you're coming from a psychoanalytic, psychodynamic background, a humanistic background, an existential background, the entire practice is predicated on the idea that we, as therapists, are in I don't know how you'd put it, in a better place, in a different place. What's Roger's terminology for it? That the counselor is in a better psychic position than the client.
Yeah.
And this is utterly sort of leveled. Talk about flattening the curve.
Well, yeah. I've always preferred that leveling, but I think what's ironic is that I don't feel like on the surface level the client prefers that leveling as much as I do.
Yeah, and I think this is something that you and I share in our approach to it. Like, I do as much as I can to be the same human being I am outside the room, in the room. I try and bring expertise, but at the same time, I try and be as much myself as is humanly possible. And,
yeah.
In some ways it's amazing because it brings the relationship, if it's been formed, if it's been cemented, if both sides are working to find each other, well, my God, what an incredible moment, like, of universality. Like, we're all facing this insane threat. Now, we can debate how big that threat is and the factors which may raise or lower it, but how incredible that we're sort of in this together. But I wonder from a client's perspective, are they wanting to come and commiserate? Are they? I suppose it's a fine line of sharing an experience, but also at what point do we stop embodying a place of security?
Yeah. I think it's a conflict. I think a lot of my clients want that. First of all, they want my office. They want the geographic, physical containment that my office provides. They don't like, meeting with me from their cars or from sitting in their beds while their spouses are doing their jobs in the other room,
Yeah.
And they want the psychological containment as well, which I think that word was attractive to me at a certain point in my career, and I've become more skeptical of it as I've aged. Like, I don't really know what it means and like whether it's really part of what we're supposed to do, other than the actual. I do think having an office is an important part of it.
And all of a sudden to sort of have access to their homes, their stuff.
Yeah, it's oddly less vulnerable in that I couldn't reach across the coffee table and slap or hug my clients, but it's also more intimate, and that they're seeing the art on my walls, not the art that I decorated my office with, but the art that my wife decorated our guest room / office with. And
yeah, sure.
I'm seeing their bedrooms, and they're hearing my child cry from the other room. It's incredibly, the boundaries have totally shifted.
Oh, they've been utterly obliterated, and that's what I'm saying. What an incredible moment for the practice, and that in some ways we've had this like hyper confrontation or hyper meeting of the other.
Yeah.
And isn't that what the whole fucking enterprise is about? Is to reach out and to establish a human connection with someone else.
Yeah.
Even down to not only us seeing their things, their personal space. I'm conscious of, the best light in our house is in our kitchen. And I'm conscious of my daughter like made a crab out of a plate the other day. And I was conscious like that was in the background. I was like, should I fucking move it? Or like, there's plates on the shelf. Like, should I don't know. In some ways, isn't that, I don't know, magnificent that we are human beings and they get to see that? Like all the artifice is sort of stripped away, even down to, like, I don't know about you, something I've been conscious of as the lockdown phase of this has gone on, and we are at present sort of 2.5 weeks into it in Britain. I'm conscious of every day, like, not getting the sweatpants on, like dressing like a human being every day.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that my clients are, by and large, we're sort of in PJ world. Sort of the artifice of how even people are presenting themselves. Because a well-worn phenomenon is that, people, I don't know, all the presentation of your office, of mine, of, you've got like a Dylan poster in yours, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Jack has a very nice office. It's beautiful. It's incredible. He's got the best office. Mine, I have, I've got your standard, Rothko print. All of that artifice of the things that we chose, we curated, and they, not only do we curate, but they curate. Some clients dress up more.
Right.
Perhaps that means something, perhaps it doesn't. And all of that has just been sort of just obliterated.
Yeah.
The question for us at the moment, as the playing field has been leveled in, I suppose there's two competing tensions, two competing forces. On one hand, there is a chance for us to experience a shared, just human connection of, to use a word from existential literature, of our thrownness. We are just thrown into this giant pile of shit, and we're all in it. And, we are just two human beings, and for this moment, we are just going to try and do something therapeutic, whatever the hell that means. And maybe that's just witnessing, maybe that's trying to find one another, maybe that's laughing, maybe that's both of us being freaked out. And that's incredible. What an amazing door for it to open for us. On the other hand, therapy is a mental health service, especially in private practice. It is something people pay for. It is something that there is an expectation of, like, well, this, he, she, they, well, they must have some idea of what they're doing.
I think that's what Kara Marotta talked about in our last episode, was that we are professionals. We have a responsibility to due diligence, to be trained. The asymmetrical part is that we have the brain of a therapist, and our clients have their own brain that is unique and equally able to offer different things, but they're coming to us for a reason.
Yeah.
And, we have to figure out, as much when the boundaries shift and it seems more equal playing field, we're all anxious, we're all in our homes, we're all, waiting to see what happens. There's something that requires an adjustment for us to be able to figure out what it is that we offer still.
Yeah, and maybe the adjustment as well is, if one was going to be really critical, maybe all the artifice has sort of been stripped away. Maybe I don't know why I refer to it this way, but like the doctorliness, the detachment, sort of the authority. I don't know, the expertise. As much as we can shout from the rooftops, I'm not an expert. Part of this is coming to terms with the fact that it really isn't there now, and what you're left with, is really nothing but the relationship in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you found working in the last few weeks. For, the timeline where we're at in Britain, about 3 weeks ago, Britain was taking the approach not that dissimilar to the U.S. of sort of like, oh, nothing to see here. This will be fine. It's, no big deal.
Yeah.
3 weeks ago, they were like, this is a big deal. Really limit what you do. 2 weeks ago, it was stay in your homes.
Yeah. Which
one assumes, will continue probably for another 2 months. I've seen a transition in the sessions as for me as the work has gone on. And a lot of clients have just said, I don't want to have video sessions. Let's just wait till this thing blows over. In part, probably in the hopes that this will be a few weeks and it will be all over. But the ones who have stayed, I mean, the shape of the sessions, and I'm not sure how you've experienced this, is it's felt rhythmically very different. It's not so much the momentum of, are we chasing this thing? Are we pursuing this part or this relationship? It's something about the comfort of, can we just both show up at the time that we say we're going to show up?
Mm-hmm.
sort of like to the absolute core essential of the thing. Can we just look at each other and say something and attempt? And there was a part of me when this all began that really sort of rejected that. And I'm still struggling at the moment as to the place of psychotherapy in this present moment. And what I would give to talk to someone someone from the Frankfurt School, or, someone who would have been practicing, Klein or Winnicott, someone who would have been practicing through the war, is I don't know how much psychotherapy you can do in a global crisis. I don't know how much. I think what you can do is you can attempt to have a therapeutic relationship and a therapeutic act, but I am struggling. In some ways, I've taken great comfort as the weeks have gone on in seeing my clients and seeing them work to reach me in the ways they can.
Yeah.
And it's helped me to reach them. In other ways, I'm sort of like, I don't know if now is the time to talk this out.
My understanding is that world events and current events weren't part of it back then.
What do you mean?
Well, the psychoanalysis didn't really have a lot of space for bringing in politics and current events into, that's not what Freud was interested in talking with his clients about.
Yeah.
I know that it must have continued in some of the biggest crises of the 20th century. I just don't think it didn't look like what it looks like now.
I mean, that's the beauty of psychoanalysis, is that, it sort of says fuck it to any external events. It's because
Right.
it's a model which has edges and contours, cores and corners, and it's applicable now as it will be applicable tomorrow if you're a psychoanalyst.
Yeah. And maybe that is because it was being developed in a time of even greater crisis than we're in now, right? I mean, it was, the early 20th century was an incredibly volatile era. I don't know, maybe that's what they needed for the practice to survive. And maybe it is kind of what you said, like the fact that we're all so isolated that we just need someone to agree that we'll be there at the same time with each other.
The most important factor is not modality, it is just two human beings in relationship. And in some ways, we've sort of gotten to this place where that's literally all we can sort of offer one another.
Yeah.
And I do take some comfort in that. I suppose the challenge I have at the moment, and maybe this is more coming from me than from my clients, because I ask my clients, much like I would in a normal session, like, is this working? Is this what you need?
Mm-hmm.
Are we moving forward? Are we helping you to grow? Or are we, is this therapeutic?
Yeah.
And they all say that, they say the same thing. But I suppose something I'm struggling with, and maybe this is just my individual struggle coming into the work, is, Sartre makes a distinction between the reflective and unreflective self. And it's a pretty simple distinction. When we are in when we're in an unreflective space, we are unaware of I. We're unaware of what's called the transcendental I, as this entity of us, me, I, Mason, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
To be unreflective is to sort of be liberated from the demands on us. And this is a very Nietzschean principle as well, my boyfriend, Friedrich. This idea of being lost in an act. A reflective space is when we are conscious of I. We're conscious of sort of me. And this is something that I think is applicable to our practice in general, but certainly in the last 3 weeks, I have gone through, I think as a lot of people have, moments of real terror, moments of real fear. And some of that's, at first it's like, oh my God, is society going to collapse? You're like, well, in a very British way, well, no, it's not. We'll be inconvenienced, but, we're not going to go Cormac McCarthy just yet. Going through moments of health anxiety, going through moments, which is not something that I have experienced in my life in 20 years. And thank God my long-suffering wife is a doctor and very patient and is utterly steadfast and is, desperately Northern, as in Northern British, in her resolve to just not complain about anything.
Yeah.
She has fielded every anxiety I have had, which is not a place I've found myself. As the weeks have gone on, where I have been in the best space, where I have been not only in a place to work effectively with clients, to spend time with my daughter, because obviously the schools are closed, so any moment I'm not with clients, I am on childcare duties. Where I have found myself the most at ease is when I have been in an unreflective space, where I've just been doing something, where I've been lost in an action. Now, for me, like, that's lifting the weights I have, or taking bike rides for an hour if I can, or, playing with the kid, or outside, enjoying the sunshine. Thank God Britain has been like, the tropics for the last 2 weeks, which has made all this easier. There's something about those moments when I have been lost in action that I have felt not only at ease, but I've had moments of really loving my life and loving the people around me and being generous in terms of, I know what matters to me, what holds meaning to me, and why I'm here. The moments when I am in a reflective space, when I start to process, when I start to churn, when I start to think and really think about me, are the moments that I become beholden to forces which I don't think are very healthy. Now, I don't want to put that on my clients or to put that on everyone, but I wonder if now, this is the tension I'm having, and I wonder if other people have it as practitioners. I wonder if now is not a time to talk this out, but a time to literally do anything. Like, do some push-ups, go for a bike ride, make a sandwich, watch some Netflix, buy some stuff. I wonder if after this, when we come to a moment post-crisis, if there is the time to dive as deep as we can into what was this. Because a lot of people are asking huge questions about themselves, about their relationships, about, because they're locked in, they're now, not only the artifice of us has been removed, but the artifice of their life, their partnerships, their whatever has been laid before them. Like, what am I doing? Who am I doing with? Why am I doing it? And do I enjoy this?
Certainly, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. My list of house projects for the summer is like almost done now.
Boom.
And so I certainly think it's part of, but there's a lot of people who aren't wired to do.
Yeah.
What I've been hearing from them is asking for some degree of accountability to that. Like we were saying, I think our job has to shift with the times. Certainly we can't process what isn't over completely, but there is the fact that information is changing so rapidly that I do think people need someone to like process that with.
What, just process the uncertainty of it all?
Yeah, and like how quickly we are learning new things every day. A batch of articles came out a few weeks ago, or a week ago or so. I mean, time is a flat circle right now. But there was a whole bunch of articles that came out last week that said that hospitalizations for young people in America is higher than the rest of the world. Okay, well, suddenly there's a new anxiety in my sessions to process,
sure,
right?
Sure.
And that was the topic for at least a week. We can't process it completely because it's not over, but I do think we can process it together. But some of the times that looks like me and my clients just saying, fuck, man, I don't know. I mean,
absolutely. And I think that in itself, who could say that's not a therapeutic act? Slavoj Žižek has a book entitled The Courage of Hopelessness, and he comes from a psychoanalytic background.
How do you think he's doing at not touching his face during all of this?
I would imagine he is probably every 5 minutes asking his wife if he has a fever, like the rest of us. But like a big, especially when you're talking about relationships or people who are mired in those unconscious patterns of the past. I mean, but there is a courage in hopelessness of going, okay, I'm going to give up the fantasy that this magic thing will work all of a sudden. Whether it's a behavior, an attitude, part of it is to see it and within a safe space, go, oh fuck, this isn't really paying off. Maybe I can make an active choice to pursue something else. But not only am I having to live my own life like by those exits, I'm being hit with that existential hammer like everyone else, but also, is now a time to fucking give up hope? Like, fuck no, man. We need as much hope as we can get.
Yeah, I agree.
You know? Like, we need, not false hope, not conspiracy, not fantasy, but we need that idea that one day there will be an end, and that the world that comes after that will be worth living in. Like, fuck me, I'm not giving that up anytime soon. I still think this will be over by the end of April. See? Hope.
This has been Between Us. I'm your host, John Totten. Our podcast is produced by myself and Mason Neely, who also composed our music. This is a one-off episode, so thanks for listening and hang in there with us for the rest of the season. We are working on it. Find us on social media. We have an Instagram, we have a Twitter account, and a Facebook account. Those are good ways to keep track of what we're up to. And until next time, take care.